So welcome to my JavaScript tutorial. Now before we get too far into this, there are some prerequisites to go over. You should have either viewed my HTML homepage tutorial video or have a good working knowledge of HTML already, because this is going to be based a fair amount on HTML but also a fair amount on the browsers. Now JavaScript, as the name implies, it is a scripting language, so it's light. You're not dealing with the heavy class creation and encapsulation and all that other stuff. And it's based on the Java syntax. So it is a little bit complicated though, because it's a scripting language. It has multiple inputs and all that. And we're going to take a look at that too. So a script, we discussed in a previous video as well, that it can run in an environment of another program, and a web browser is that other program that JavaScript is going to be running in. I'm going to show a little bit about that environment concept and the multiple entry points here as I look at these two programs here. Now one of these guys is a CLI. It's a command line interface program, and it's pretty simple. It's just going to go, it's going to do one thing and then it's going to do the next. So there it is. Did that first, did that last. Now, when it comes to a GUI thing, and that's what Firefox is, it's just, or any browser really, this is a advanced GUI application. So it doesn't just get control transferred to it and it does whatever it's going to do. It gets control and then it transfers control and waits for control back. So let's take a quick look at this too, how this works. So here I have, this is a Python program again, and this is dealing with GTK. This is it stands for Graphics Toolkit, and it's meant to give access to creating GUI applications from Python. Here I have a function that quits, and so this is not actually run right away. Functions are not run until they're actually called, and JavaScript is the same way as that. They won't be run until they're actually called. So it's going to start running down here. It's going to import, and then it's going to create this function, but it won't actually run it. And then we're going to come down here and it's going to create the window and set the title for the window, and it's going to connect here. This is where it's telling it, it's sending this out to GTK to tell it, hey, when this window is destroyed, when my new window is destroyed, run this function which ends the program. This is the ending program command actually. So this tells it that it can exit, because otherwise it won't exit. Even after its last window is closed. GTK is like that. Sets the size and shows everything, and then it starts. This is where it sends control away, and then it's going to get it back here. So for that sample, we're going to just see how that is. So I have that window that was created, right? We went over all this. We started it, it created the window, put my text up, created the size, and launched it. Now I have a working window. If I hit that X, it's going to run this, and it is going to exit, which means when I see it over here, it will give me my new prompt, because it's exited at that point. So hopefully that's an indication to show you how a GUI program works, which is what Firefox is, and I need that understanding there to help you to get the idea of the multiple entry points. The page is loaded, and you're going to have certain scripts that you can run right when your page loads. And then there are other scripts that you can attach to other things that happen as I click on, buttons or something like that. And in this case, most of my scripting is over here on the sandbox area. So we are going to take a look at what I did. So we actually have two files here. One of them, we have a JavaScript that's imported. Taking a quick look here, this is the HTML file. This is where we left off from our CSS tutorials, but I added some more to it. I added some scripts mainly. And so I added some scripts here and there. I don't think I even added any IDs or anything. Everything is just done through what it was. But here's where the main part of the script is. And here's where we can see that, we can run some stuff. If I uncommented that, this alert box would run as soon as the window's loaded. And in fact, we're going to show that right here. Going into the sandbox, and here we have the alert box. Now we've also got something else. As we see in about 5 seconds, it's going to turn my background colors. And actually, we don't need the GUI up anymore. I've already explained it. So, this is where we have a lot of script that's put right in here. First of all, I'm just going to remember the background color thing that changed. But these things will run immediately as the script is created. I wouldn't really try and grab any elements in there because they might not be fully created. That's more after the page loads. And it's also going to run your external script here. I've created this one here that has a source, and that's where this is. And essentially what this is doing, the way the computer is going to look at this, and that's why I'm just going to, it's this item here is the same, may as well just be put right in here. And so I'm going to leave it right there. The page loaded function, that's a user-defined function. It has to be called by something else. And that's where it set the window timeout. And then when the timeout expired, it passes to this script down here that changed the background color. But we'll look into more what all of this stuff does, but I pulled that out there so we don't have to deal with the other remote JavaScript. We can really just look at this line by line, analyze it, and get an understanding of exactly what this is. There's also a couple of other functions that happen inside of my actually I did change some of the HTML. I will take a look at that later on with you too. But here is where we have a number of other attributes that are script related that deal with an event. On load, script language, colon, and the function I'm calling. And it doesn't have to be a function that you're calling. You could actually put, if I wanted to, I could actually put a whole bunch of commands in here. I could have put that entire page load. I could put this right down there instead of calling page loaded, but I wanted to show how an event would be called, how an event function would be called. And inside here too, there's a couple of variables as well that you could probably access from here, but they'd only be accessible on the other function, depending on exactly what that event is. But sometimes there's additional variables that are sent to that event, and they would be accessible on inside the function if they're passed. So you can also pass variables to it. Pass variable like say this. If I pass this, it would be to the body tag, or kind of to the document, probably. But that's not really one that you'd really run this on. You'd more run it on something else down here that you would click. And then I've also got, if I click on my text box, once again, it has another function to start mayhem, which we'll explore what I'm referring to. But that button, too, we've got JavaScript button clicked. And actually, I could do something even more on here, and I could go ahead and say, I'm going to add this. Actually, I'm going to use this dot actually I'm going to say clicked button. That's more fun. So any of those things though that we put and I would have to refresh this to have that all take place. But here it should change the value of the button clicked. But these are other spots where scripts will enter, and this just depends on those events happening. As soon as that event happens, as soon as you click on the button, it's going to run this JavaScript, and it's going to run this, and I can run multiple commands. As we can see, I can run them directly here. We should show that pretty easily. And yeah, so as the page loads and all that. So let's just take a quick look here at the page reload. It runs when one's there. And you'll see, well, I can change that too. That was something user entered, stop clicking me. We can make it to where it likes to get clicked a lot, whatever we want to enter. But that was part of what I entered in that function. So each of those are function calls with the exception of this last thing. We'll notice down here at the bottom that should change to clicked button. And it waited until I was done with that alert, because that alert holds. The function will hold. When that call was done, when it goes to button clicked, and that's where the alert was in that button clicked. This calls my function up here called button clicked, and that's where the window alert comes in. Stop clicking me. Click me more. We can change that. But these alerts, they hold. They wait till the user has given whatever they're going to, it does whatever they're going to do with it. They wait till the user has acknowledged it. Then it will return. And then it allows this function to continue with whatever's in here. And until this function returns, down here at the bottom, this won't continue to the next line, which is to change that clicked button. Also, when it loaded, I think I explained that already here. Once the page loads, we have the script here that calls the function page loaded. Was in the external file, we moved it to here. It's going to set a timeout for 5 seconds. This is in milliseconds, so it's every 1,000 is 1 second. Waits 5 seconds, and then it calls timeout expired. And down here on my timeout, I get these guys. And we're going to talk about where this stuff comes on into. Okay, this is where the environment has the opportunity to call parts of your script, and it also has the opportunity to throw in environmental items, such as window and document. I could call this directly by document. I could say document BG color as well, because it's also got a reference by document in JavaScript. But it's also off the window document, and I prefer that because it's a little bit more of a solid explanation to the computer, that it won't be as ambiguous what I'm calling for. And then it goes ahead and does that. changes my background color. So it's going to get the window, and then on that window object there's reference to document object, and the document has a property of the background color, which is then changed to a light blue. That's a light blue color in hex. It should have been with a hash value, ideally, but it's, you know, sometimes you can make a mistake here, and it's some things you can get away with. So it runs when the page is reached, and in 5 seconds we will get it blue. And yes, we changed that. Click me more. It's just a string that you can put on in there, whatever you want on there, and it waits, it holds for that. Okay, so within the script tag, though, this is where I'm going to put a lot of the stuff I really want to set up. And then I've also got, current top. That's a variable that we're going to look at later on, but that's a variable that's set. So it sets that immediately. It creates these functions, and it sets these values. It runs that window alert, runs when reached. I'm going to comment that back out. So we explained the timeout. That is a way of delaying something. You could also, later on down here, we're going to get into another something that it does on this, a couple of other things, I think. Maybe there's only one left to really explain. Window alert. Okay, we discussed alert. It hangs property, and it usually finishes one thing and goes on to another one, but there are some things that can be set to be asynchronous. All right, I think mayhem is the last thing to explain, which is long, but it works. There's a lot to explain, and there's a lot to learn. So starting mayhem is done whenever I try to click on my text box. It calls start mayhem. So whenever I'm trying to put something in there, I'm going to click on it because, of course, I want to select it and I want to, you know, add a value to it, right? So a window object is passed on. It has a document object attached to it, and in there I can get elements by name, or I could also get an element by ID if I had given one an ID. I haven't given any of them IDs, so in this case, get elements by name is also the more complex one to know, because you're going to give it the name, that's the name attribute, and then it's going to return every single element. It's going to return an array. It's not a single one. It doesn't matter if there's only one on the whole page. It's going to return an array of every single element with that name. You can have multiple elements with the same name, not the same ID. With the ID version of this, get element singular by ID, it is only going to get one element back, so you don't have the array to deal with. But this sets my text box variable to a reference of that one. So I grab that whole array, and I grab the first one out of that array, and that is my text box. And it should be getting them by the order of which they appear in your HTML code. Text box value. So this is the text box. This is getting the text box that I clicked on. I could have sent this through as a this. Remember, we had that this variable that represents the element that was clicked. And I could have passed that. In fact, well, after I'm done with this, I should probably just explain it, and we'll take a look at what that would look like as well. But on that text box, it's going to change that. It's going to make its text be up, up, and away. And I can also go in here and edit that text box's style, position. So I can grab any of these elements throughout the whole page. That's my main point here. Most elements will have properties. Well, I think we've seen what a lot of them have. They have click or loaded on the page. But a lot of them, you know, the inputs and the links a lot of times have a clicked that you can access as well, that are events. Those are events that you can access. But these are properties and methods. This is a property. And most things have properties for all of the HTML attributes, and it's generally named the same as the HTML attribute was. Everything is camel case in what they create in JavaScript. That's whenever I create stuff, I use title case. That way I don't conflict with anything which they've done. But a lot of programmers stick to camel case with it. It's up to you what you want to do. If you want to look good like everything else, it probably looks better being camel case like everything else. That's probably why they do it. But here, you know, I mean, it has a value attribute in the HTML tag, so I have a value property, you know. But then style information as well. The style attribute, it has a style property. But inside that, all of those CSS properties, you remove the dash. Every time you see a dash, you remove the dash and make the next letter in uppercase. It's camel cased. I can't think of any exceptions to that rule. So you can change everything. You can change the CSS style. You can change the text. You can change everything through JavaScript. And here we change it to a relative position. And then I'm going to set an interval for continue mayhem. And that's where I've used the window set interval. That's one of those window features as well. So we have set timeout. It runs once and it's done. We have set interval that will run until it's canceled. And every interval, or every time it does either one, it's going to call that function with this many milliseconds delay. And then if you put commas in here and pass additional arguments, you're passing that onto the function. And you would receive them. Actually, I don't really show anywhere where I've received that. So I am going to do that text, sending that text box through. That way I can show how parameters are passed as well. Passed and received, and how they don't need to be connected with each other either. All right. What they need, where they need to be connected, where they don't need to be connected, rather. So on continue mayhem. Now I'm going to keep changing this current top, but that was 0 over here. So I set it to 0, but I need it defined outside of here, because if I define it inside the function, then it will be reset every time. So I defined it outside the function. And here it deducts 10 off of the current top. So it's going to basically move it up 10 pixels every time this runs, and this is every 1,000 is 1 second. This is 1/10 of a second. So every 1/10 of a second, it's going to move it up 2 pixels for the current top. Now this is just a variable, but this is where I actually turn it into the text box. This is where the text box that I was typing in, that's been set over here, is changed. That style, that top position. So the top position on that style, you can have inline for the position. You can have inline, which is normal, relative, which makes its position relative to where it was. You can offset it by a little bit. And in that case, your top and your left properties move it by that amount. Negative going up, positive going down on the top, negative going left, positive going right. If it's absolute, I can also use absolute, and that would mean from the top left corner, how many pixels down is the top and how many pixels to the left is the left. of that object. So these are properties I can change, and in this case, so I am assigning this on my first call. I made it relative over here, and now for the position, and now the top, I'm moving it up to a -1, and each time this continues, it's going to be, this time it runs again. Next time the interval triggers again, this is going to be it's going to be decreased by 10. So it's going to be a -20, and I'm going to set that to that text box style. So whenever that current top equals -200, so it's only going to move it up 200, then it's going to clear the interval that we set. This is where this returns a handle to clear that interval later on, and that's what we're doing here. We're clearing that. And now we're going to actually change the type, because like I said, there are many different, you can change just about everything in the document. You can actually rewrite the document with script. And in this case, I am taking the password, once again, went into the document and gotten the elements array by name, by the name of password, and got the first one, starts at 0, so I got the very first element returned, which is also the only, and grabbed its type property and set that to text. So I just changed it from a password field to a text field once it goes all the way up. So this whole set of script, to see what this does, as soon as I tap on this, it says up, up, and away, goes all the way up, and exposes my super secret password. Not really good for real-world use to change that to a text field, but it does go to show what can be done, what the capabilities are of the script. Now, one flaw of this script is, if I click on this again, it's going to run again, right? Let's see here. We know that that text box starts start mayhem, and it's going to reset that text to what it already is. The position's already relative. It's going to reset it to that, and it's going to start the interval again, and it's going to continue to decrease. It's going to be moving the text box up. That value will never be 200, which means it's going to go on forever. So probably would want to also make sure that I put position is the style top as a 0 again, so that way I could catch it again here. But if I hit that again, it will never be seen again, and it will continue to go up and up and up, theoretically, even though it's not being displayed. So let's take a look at passing that text box instead of using this here, instead of grabbing it. So the process that I would use on this, one of these variables is this, and I am going to pass that as my first argument. Now, I do not have to refer to that as the same name here as I did when I passed it, but I do need to refer to whatever it is in here. So here I'm just going to say text box, and that means I can just eliminate that call. So what this means, this is a comment, single line. What that means is the computer is going to see this, and it's pulling in this text box from the argument, not from now the downside with this is it might not be able to set the current top, because it might not, we haven't actually set it as a variable. This was only as an argument in here, but this should give it that run. So let's see how that works for it. Now once again, it kept all my values because it's persisting that data. And it won't move it up because it's not recognizing it down here. But if I actually reset this, you would see it is referencing that. It just won't move it up because once I get down here to continue mayhem, it's not recognizing this box because this is only in the scope of this function. We might try, but this is probably also recognizing so it did not recognize it either. So the only other thing that I can say would be to make this variable different when I pass it. And this could be anything. I could call it whatever I want to. But then I am going to set it down in here and say text box equals my text box. And that will allow me to run this. And that should actually display it the way we're expecting it to. So you see, those arguments, they don't really persist on. That's what I was trying to show you here. What is this? Okay. Just get these guys off of here, and we are and now that works. So hopefully that's a good example of everything there and where you can find things as far as where they're related to CSS and HTML. And those events, you know, your click events are pretty common across a lot of things. Page loading has its loaded event on loaded. That's different. Yeah, that should be enough mayhem for our JavaScript tutorial. Thank you for watching.